54-year-old Davis Maturi was doing yard work outside his Minneapolis home when his neighbor John Sorchak shot him in the neck through an open upstairs window of his home. The rivalry reportedly went on for months leading up to the crime, which occurred while Maturi was cutting a tree that Sorchak had told him not to touch. Maturi survived his injuries, and the shooting adds to a growing list of 19 disputes and counting between him and Sorchak that the police have responded to over the last year. Most of the complaints involve allegations against Sorchak of targeting Maturi with racist threats, harassment, and hate speech. But no major action was taken against Sorchak, and even the Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara has admitted that his department failed 100% to prevent the shooting. O'Hara claimed that the agency had previously tried to arrest Sorchak, who they knew had a history of mental health issues. After the shooting, he was taken into custody by a SWAT team. He remains held without bail on suspicion of attempted murder, stalking, harassment, and other charges. Number 14. The murder of Eric Pate Jr. Police in Houston, Texas are searching for the killer of 38-year-old Eric Pate Jr., who was gunned down inside his garage on Halloween night by someone wearing a Michael Myers mask. Officers responded to the scene shortly before midnight after receiving calls from neighbors and one of Pate's 3 children, 2 of whom were at the residence at the time of the shooting but were unharmed, while the 3rd child was in the care of a relative. The suspected killer was seen fleeing the area on foot but remains unidentified and at large. To make an already strange tragedy even more bizarre, Pate's murder came just a few months after the murder of his estranged wife and the mother of his children. 37-year-old Carmen Peterson was fatally shot inside a Houston apartment, and Pate was considered a person of interest in the yet unsolved crime. Detectives are currently working to determine whether and how the 2 cases are connected, and they're also trying to identify a motive for Pate's murder. Number 13. Edenilson Velasquez Larin and Hugo Diaz Amaya. 2 notorious high-ranking MS-13 leaders have been indicted in a series of gruesome machete murders that took place across Long Island, New York, between 2016 and 2022. The slayings were carried out by 35-year-old Edenilson Tiny Velasquez Larin, 36-year-old Hugo Splinter Diaz Amaya, and 15 co-conspirators, all of whom are now being held responsible for their alleged actions in federal criminal court. According to the U.S. Attorney's Office, the killers hacked their victims' bodies and scattered the dismembered remains throughout the region. The killings were particularly brutal. For example, gang member Eric Monge was executed just moments after parting ways with his wife and children. The murders were committed under the orders of Tiny and Splinter, who authorities say are 2 of the most senior-ranking MS-13 members in the United States. Until now, they were also 2 of the only remaining members of the gang's top American tier, La Mesa, who weren't in jail for their crimes. Number 12. Junior Edwards. A 37-year-old Pennsylvania man is accused of fatally shooting his young son's mother and grandmother at the victim's New Jersey home. Junior Edwards reportedly drove across state lines from Lansdowne to Willingboro Township, where he forced his way into the residence of 33-year-old Catherine Nunez and 54-year-old Marisol Nunez at 4 a.m. by smashing a window with his fist. The women were both shot multiple times in an upstairs bedroom and were pronounced dead at the scene. Police recovered the murder weapon outside the home, and while authorities have yet to reveal an alleged motive for the double homicide, the victims' relatives described Edwards as a monster who had threatened them many times. Speaking with the Courier Post, Marisol's brother and Catherine's uncle, Wilson Nunez, described the tragic slaying as the American dream turned into an American nightmare. Edwards is currently detained without bail on charges of murder, home invasion, burglary with a firearm, unlawful possession of a weapon for an unlawful purpose, and endangering the welfare of a child. Number 11. Candice Craig. 45-year-old Candice Craig of Landover, Maryland, has been found guilty of murdering, dismembering, and grilling her mother, 71-year-old Margaret Craig. Police discovered the grisly scene while performing a welfare check at Margaret's home. They were allowed inside by Candice and quickly noticed the stench of decomposition coming from some garbage bags, where they found some of Margaret's severed body parts. More than a week earlier, the senior citizen had been choked to death, cut up with a chainsaw, and burned on a charcoal grill and in a fire. Candice reportedly killed her mother during a heated argument about her alleged fraudulent use of Margaret's credit cards. Authorities believe Margaret confronted her daughter and threatened to report the credit card fraud to the police, sparking the deadly disagreement that took her life. According to prosecutors, Candice dismembered the body with the help from her 19-year-old daughter, Margaret's granddaughter, Salaya Hardy, who pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact. Both women are due to be sentenced at a later date, which is yet to be scheduled. Number 10. Adam Frel. Before murdering his girlfriend, 30-year-old Adam Frel warned her that she would end up like Gabby Petito, who was infamously killed by her boyfriend during a road trip across the United States. Frel's case caught national attention after the victim, 26-year-old Mayo Clinic researcher Madeline Kingsbury, vanished without a trace after dropping her children off at a daycare in Winona, Minnesota. 69 days later, her murdered body was found in a wooded area near a property owned by Frel's parents. At the time of Kingsbury's murder, she and Frel were months behind on rent and had recently learned that their landlord would not be renewing the lease on their apartment. Frel had been laid off from his job at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic and hadn't worked in nearly 2 years, while Kingsbury was left on her own to support the family solely with her earnings. There was also reportedly a history of abuse in the relationship, as well as a financial incentive for Frel to want his wife dead. From the very beginning of the case, Frel denied any involvement in his wife's murder, but authorities did not buy his claims of innocence, and neither did the jury that the case recently went in front of. His sentencing is scheduled for December 17th. Number 9. Hamza Sadovic. 24-year-old Hamza Sadovic of Des Moines, Iowa, is accused of shooting his ex-girlfriend's parents, 45-year-old Ruth Sue Ann Robison and 52-year-old Tony Ray Robison. According to authorities, Sadovic fired at the couple as they tried to help their 24-year-old daughter Jasmine move out of his residence. Jasmine had recently broken up with Sadovic, who shot the victims with a 9mm pistol. He then tried to shoot Jasmine, who managed to escape the gunfire. Ruth Robison was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital, while Tony reportedly remains hospitalized in critical condition. In the meantime, Sadovic remains in custody on suspicion of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and intimidation with a dangerous weapon. Number 8. Ryan Ferguson. 40-year-old Ryan Ferguson of Columbia, Missouri is due to receive a massive $38 million payout after the city failed to pay him a court-ordered settlement following his wrongful conviction for murder. Ferguson was wrongfully found guilty of the 2001 killing of journalist Kent Heitholt, who was beaten and strangled to death in the parking lot of the Columbia Tribune Daily. Under pressure from investigators, Ferguson's friend falsely confessed to the crime, implicating Ferguson in the process. As a result of his friend's coerced confession, Ferguson spent more than a decade behind bars before his conviction was overturned in 2013. In 2017, a jury awarded him $11 million, but the city's insurance company tried to skirt around its requirement to pay, leaving Ferguson with no choice but to sue again. Between both lawsuits, Ferguson has been awarded $48 million. 86% of the sum will go to the 6 police officers for their legal costs, and the rest will go to Ferguson, marking a long-awaited victory in his fight for justice. Number 7. Peanut the Squirrel. Animal lover Mark Longo and his wife Daniela were dealt a devastating blow when the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation seized and euthanized the couple's pet squirrel, Peanut, and their raccoon, Fred. The DEC visited the Longos' home after receiving a complaint about the animals, who the couple had rehabilitated from a young age. Mark and Daniela had decided to keep Peanut after they tried releasing him into the wild, and he kept returning to their home. After putting the animals down, the DEC tested them for rabies, which requires taking a sample from their brain. The mere thought of his beloved pets being decapitated was devastating for Longo, who is planning to sue the agency for seizing Fred and Peanut. Additionally, the case has generated widespread outrage among members of the public who feel that the DEC had no right to take or kill the animals. Mark is planning to give Peanut a proper burial courtesy of a funeral home in upstate New York, which has volunteered the use of its space free of charge. Number 6. Nejc Secik. a New York City resident with nearly 24 prior arrests under his belt, is now facing charges for stabbing a fruit vendor in Queens who asked him not to sleep near their cart. According to reports, 47-year-old Nejc was snoozing on the pavement near the fruit stand in the Sunnyside neighborhood when the 35-year-old employee woke him and asked him to relocate. Apparently outraged by the request, Nejc proceeded to stab the worker all over his body in a fit of rage. The victim was hospitalized in stable condition. In the meantime, officers caught up with the accused assailant at a nearby bus stop. Nejc is currently being held without bail at Rikers Island on charges of attempted murder, assault causing serious injury with a weapon, reckless endangerment, menacing with a weapon, criminal possession of a weapon, and harassment. Number 5. Savon Tyler. A Florida woman is facing a first-degree murder charge for fatally shooting another woman while live-streaming the crime on social media. 35-year-old Savon Tyler is accused of opening fire on 34-year-old photographer Lauren Martin during a mutual combat-style fistfight in Sanford, which began as a verbal altercation. The fight quickly escalated into physical blows, at which point Tyler reportedly pulled a gun and fired several shots at Martin. The victim's family told local station WESH that the women were fighting over some photos Martin had taken of Tyler. Their disagreement was fueled by social media drama, prompting Martin to go to Tyler's home. She was later found lying in the road with multiple gunshot wounds and was rushed to the hospital where she died from her injuries. Police obtained footage of the crime and proceeded to arrest Tyler, who remains held without bail at the Seminole County Jail on suspicion of first-degree murder. Number 4. Daniel Penny. In one of the Big Apple's most high-profile cases in recent years, a former U.S. Marine named Daniel Penny is on trial for killing a black subway passenger named Jordan Neely. According to the defense, Neely was acting out of control and attacking strap hangers, prompting Penny to put him in a chokehold for the safety of himself and others, which, unfortunately, resulted in Neely's death. The prosecution, on the other hand, is arguing that Penny's actions constitute manslaughter. During the trial, jurors listened to a 911 call placed by 18-year-old Moriela Sanchez. During the conversation, she could be heard telling the operator that someone was attacking people on an uptown-bound F train. Sanchez requested police and an ambulance and described the scene unfolding in front of her, stating that there was a white man holding the homeless guy down. Another passenger, Yvette Rosario, testified that Neely's behavior scared her. She captured footage of the incident, which showed Penny restraining Neely while bystanders pleaded with him to let go. The trial is ongoing. Number 3. Jaizelle Victoria Gonzalez. The 42-year-old roommate of a Florida woman who vanished is now being accused of her murder. Jaizelle Victoria Gonzalez is facing charges of second-degree murder, grand theft, and tampering with evidence in connection with the disappearance of Ranelaide Medina Pacheco, who was also 42 years old. Victoria Gonzalez was arrested in Hartford, Connecticut, nearly 2 years after she called the Orlando Police Department and reported that she had not seen or heard from Medina Pacheco in several days. Throughout the investigation, detectives uncovered numerous inconsistencies in the suspect's version of events versus the actual evidence, which includes signs of a violent incident occurring at the women's shared home. After traveling to Hartford and interviewing Victoria Gonzalez, investigators determined that they had sufficient probable cause to charge her with Medina Pacheco's murder. Authorities have revealed few other details about the circumstances surrounding the victim's disappearance and death. Number 2. Brad Simpson. A Texas man suspected of killing his missing wife has officially been charged with murder. 53-year-old Brad Simpson and his wife of 22 years, Suzanne, were seen arguing during a birthday party at a San Antonio club. The disagreement continued and got physical after the couple returned home, but the police were unaware of the situation until 24 hours later when Brad reported Suzanne missing. A neighbor reported seeing Brad grabbing Suzanne by the torso, while another nearby resident described hearing screams coming from a nearby wooded area on the night of Suzanne's disappearance. A short while later, Brad was seen leaving the residence in his pickup truck, then returning to the home an hour or two after that. From the beginning of the case, law enforcement described Brad as being uncooperative with their investigation. He was initially charged with assault causing bodily injury, family violence, and unlawful restraint, and is now behind bars without bail on a murder charge. Suzanne's body has yet to be found. Number 1. Susan Smith. More than 130 letters have poured into the South Carolina Parole Board protesting the impending release of Susan Smith, who has spent the last 30 years in prison for drowning her 2 sons, Michael and Alex. Much of the correspondence came after Susan's ex-husband, David Smith, encouraged the public to oppose his ex-wife's bid for freedom. During an interview with Fox Carolina, David said that he thinks Susan deserves to spend the rest of her life behind bars. He urged viewers to remember the horrifying nature of Susan's crime and reported he plans to be present at the parole board hearing, where he'll urge the board not to release Susan, in addition to taking 2 innocent lives. Susan initially blamed her son's murders on an unidentified black man, telling police that the nameless suspect had carjacked her and the kids. The false claim triggered a large-scale manhunt, needlessly targeting predominantly African-American neighborhoods. Susan will face the parole board on November 20th amid a 90-day ban from communication and canteen privileges due to an attempt to cash in on her notoriety by talking to a documentary filmmaker.